Hello, welcome to your Global Fashion and Supply Chain podcast. Today, Thursday, April 2nd. Air freight rates up 95%. Türkiye named as one of the most vulnerable economies to an oil price shock. Manufacturing still contracting. And at the same time, Germany posts a record year for apparel imports. That combination tells you everything about where the industry stands right now. The demand exists, but reaching it is getting more expensive by the week. I'm Sedat Sezer, breaking down the news and insights you need to start your day. Let me start with freight, because the numbers Drewry published this week deserves more than a headline reading. Air freight rates have surged up to 95%. Since the Hormuz crisis intensified, two drivers, fuel costs have spiked sharply, as Brent crude sits in the $140 and $108 range, and available capacity has shrunk as carriers reroute and reduce exposure to the region. Now 95% sounds almost staggering, but think about what it means operationally. If you were running an air freight shipment at a cost base you'd budget 6 months ago, you've just blown through your logistic allocation. For fast fashion replenishment runs, for urgent orders with short windows, for any manufacturer who uses air as a flex capacity tool, this is a serious cost event, not background noise. And it's not just air. The Baltic Dry Index, which tracks sea freight by dry bulk, has climbed 2,030 points. Sea freight is the alternative, and that alternative is also getting more expensive. So the pressure is coming from both directions simultaneously. Manufacturers who quoted delivery cost in Q3 and Q4 of last year are now looking at contracts that no longer make commercial sense. This connects directly to Türkiye's specific vulnerability in this environment. S&P Global put out an assessment this week that was quite direct. Türkiye is among most exposed economies to an oil price shock. The reason is structural. Türkiye is a net energy importer. When oil moves, almost everything in the Turkish cost structure moves with it. Electricity, natural gas, diesel. And textile production is not a low energy business. Spinning, dyeing, finishing, there are energy intensive processes. When a factory utility bills goes up 20 or 30%, that doesn't show up as a clean line item. It distributes across every order, every SKU, every delivery. Margins that were already tight get tighter. And the ability to hold competitive price against, say, a Bangladesh competitor who doesn't carry the same energy exposure because harder to defend. Add to that what ISO's manufacturing PMI told us for March, 47.9. The contraction threshold is 50. We've been below it for a while now. What the PMI number specifically reflects is that new orders are weak, output is being held back, and export inventory levels are declining. That last point matters. If export stock is going down, it means either demand is being met, which would be good news, or manufacturers are scaling back production because the order pipeline doesn't justify running full capacity. Given the freight and energy context, the second scenario is more likely read. And there is a raw material dimension building underneath all of this. Turkish cotton planting area for 2026 season is expected to fall sharply. Farmers are rotating into other crops. Less domestic cotton means higher import dependency. And in a high freight, high energy, geopolitically volatile environment, importing your primary raw material becomes a compounding cost problem. Türkiye already sources a significant portion of its cotton from abroad. A wider domestic supply gap makes that dependency more acute and more expensive. Now here's where this story gets genuinely interesting, because the demand signal from Germany is pointing in the opposite direction. Germany's apparel imports hit $46.8 billion in last year, a historical record. That's not a small number, and it didn't happen despite Germany's economic headwinds, it's happened through them. Germany is Turkey's single most important apparel export market. That buying volume is real, it's sustained, and it's looking for reliable suppliers. If you are a Turkish manufacturer, trying to understand where the opportunity sits, Germany is a clear answer on the demand side. The question is whether you can compete for that business at a price that actually makes money right now. And that's where PVH comes into the picture. Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. PVH reported full year 2025 revenue of $8.95 billion, up 3% year on year, a solid result. But their 2026 guidance is cautious. The specific language they used pointed to tariff uncertainty and supply chain cost escalation as the key risk factors. A company of that scale, managing global sourcing across dozens of production markets, is telling investors that the cost and trade environment makes it hard to forecast confidently. That's not a routine disclaimer. That's a company signaling it may need rebalance where it sources from. For Türkiye, that kind of signal from a major American brand is exactly conversation the nearshoring argument have been built around. For the past 2 years, the proximity to European market, the speed advantage, the lower tariff exposure relative to Asian origins, all of that becomes more valuable when brands are anxious about costs and lead times. But capturing that opportunity requires something from Turkish manufacturers in return: sustainability documentation, digital product passport readiness, and the kind of compliance infrastructure that a brand like PVH or a retailer sourcing into Germany's market will require before they move volume. Being geographically close isn't enough on its own anymore. On the brand side, there is one more development from flagging. Nike reported flat Q3 revenues, and their CEO was candid in internal communications that the recovery is moving more slowly than expected. Order cancellations and demand compression are ongoing issues. Nike operates at a scale where their sourcing decisions move market volume across production hubs, including Türkiye. A prolonged, slow recovery at Nike doesn't help anyone in the supplier ecosystem. So the picture this morning is freight cost compressing margins, energy cost doing the same thing domestically, cotton supply tightening, manufacturing output still contracting. But Germany demand at record levels and major global brands actively reassessing their supply chain geography, both are true at the same time. The main question I want to leave you with today is, when the cost environment creates this much pressure on the supply side, and the demand environment is simultaneously offering a genuine window, which Turkish manufacturers have the balance sheet and the compliance infrastructure to actually walk through that window? That's all for today's analysis. To make sure you never miss the insights behind the number, hit subscribe wherever you get your podcast. I'm Sedat Sezer. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow, and until then, stay ahead of the curve.